Hi folks, Travis Fox here with foxoptic.com. Today I'm going to be walking you through all of the main menu functions. Again, we're dealing with this Pulsar Thermion LRF. In the case of this, the device I'm showing you here, the footage through here, it's the XL50, but this would apply again to any of the LRF units. And honestly, again, other than just the LRF footage, or the things that have to do with the LRF in the footage, this is going to apply to any Thermion Pro unit. So basically any of the newer Thermion stuff that's out there. So let's jump inside of the scope here. So to get into the main menu, we're going to be using the encoder over here. So on the encoder, basically we've got a rotary dial and we've got a push button in the middle. So the entire main menu is going to be manipulated using this with either a series of long presses or short presses and then rolling the dial. I think you'll find it pretty intuitive once I get in here and explain it. So to enter the main menu, you're going to initiate with a long press. If you accidentally short press, you're going to get the quick menu over there on the right hand side, and you can either just do nothing and let that time out on its own, or you can, at any time you're in a menu, you can always do a long press to back up one step. So we're going to do long press initially to pull up the main menu, and you'll see that there are 2 pages to the main menu, and that's indicated by that little dot at the top, and it's just a matter of rolling either past the top or past the bottom of whichever page you're on to activate the second page and the features that are on that page. So let's start right here. We're going to call this page 1 based on the fact that it's the first dot. And so the things I want to just kind of quickly run through is, if I don't do anything, I think it's about 5 seconds of inactivity and that menu will time out. And honestly, when you're new to this, that can get a little bit aggravating. I deal with a lot of older guys that have some issue with that, as they're manipulating the menu, but just trust me on this. It's one of them things where you'll get used to it with a little bit of practice. It's actually pretty intuitive. And, mainly I think the biggest struggle guys have is they just kind of don't understand how to read the menu and know what they're doing. So that's what I'm going to try to clear up for you here. So again, long press to get back in that menu. And the first thing I want you to pay attention to is the little triangle that's rolling up and down as I change the encoder position here. So, I'm rolling down now through the list, and you can see where that triangle, as it lands on the individual items, it turns white to indicate to you which item you're on or going to be manipulating. And then also at the top of the list up there, it tells you the name of that item. So, that's a little less intuitive than if it were off to the right of that, I think. But it's one of them things where I think the reason they've done it like this is to keep that menu as unintrusive as possible, so that you can kind of retain the ability to see the image in the background as you're applying some changes, in some instances where you need to apply changes. That's been, honestly, I'm not meaning to beat up on some of the other devices, but that's one of the biggest issues with some of the other devices is the intuitiveness of their menus is much worse than the Pulsar, in the sense that you'll get inside of the main menu a lot of time and completely block the screen out while you're making changes, and you almost got to go into the menu and make changes and go back out to see what the effect was, and in and out. And it's like Pulsar has tried to make their stuff very intuitive. So again, long press to get in that main menu. So we're going to start right here at the top, so you can see where my triangle's up there. It tells me the name of that menu is Retical and Zeroing. Short press is going to select or open that menu, and then once I'm in it, you see where we follow the same kind of functionality with that triangle pointing at the objects that are inside of that menu to where I can adjust those. So up here at the top in the Retical and Zeroing menu, we have the zero profiles. So if I short press to open that, you can see where there are the 10 profiles that I can have in this particular device. Now, yours may just say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, or, maybe you've got profiles set up. If it's comes straight out of the box, it's just going to be all letters because you're not going to have anything set up. But obviously, you can see where I've got profiles set up inside this device. And to select a new profile is as simple as, you know, roll down here. Let's say I want a brand new one. I come down to H. I don't have anything on that one. Short press to select it, and you can see here where I don't have any distances, you know, there's nothing under that H profile. So the profiles are essentially like, you know, think of those as like little memory presets for the information that you're going to store under those. So like a profile, for example, would be where if I were shooting on one gun and I had multiple loads, you know, like that had very different trajectories, or maybe sometimes I'm shooting one gun with or without a suppressor, or maybe I'm putting this thing on entirely different guns. Utilizing the profiles gives me the ability, basically, you know, I'm running this Bobro QD mount on here. I could put this on, let's say a 223, set everything up and zero it on, we'll say, a profile, and if I wanted to go over to a 308 that I have in another application, I could take the QD, you know, unsnap the thing from the Picatinny rail, put it over on my 308, mark my location on that, go in, and before I start setting it up to zero, I would come in and I'd switch to a new profile. So like in that case, maybe I switch to B profile, and effectively, everything that's on that A profile for my 223 will be saved, and it's, you know, if I ever go back to the 223, I put it in the same position, lock it on there, and just switch back to that A profile. So, you know, that's very useful because these things are decently expensive. It's going to give you a lot of versatility in terms of the different devices you could use it on potentially. So, you know, that's what the profiles are for. I get a lot of guys that get confused between profiles and aiming points. Aiming points are going to be, so if I long press to get back into the main menu, short press to open that reticle and zeroing, and you'll see where if I come down here, I've got add a new distance. So, you know, I could add an aiming point there, and I can add up to 10 aiming points under each profile. So like I'm going to jump up here. I've got a profile where I've got some additional aiming points actually set up on this. I think it's on this F profile here. So you can see in this one where I have a 100, a 300, a 400, and a 500 yard aiming point. And the numbers off to the side of there are telling me the deviations in click value from what they're going to call the primary zero. So this 100 yards up here was my primary, or my initial 0 point. And so it's telling me that my 300 yard aiming point is 2.75 clicks different than my 100 yard. And likewise, my 400 is, I believe it was 4.12, and then 6.75 on my 500. So that's not MOA, it's actually click value that they're giving you there, but it's just kind of a quick, fast indication to you, the user, as to what the deviation or separations are on those. And there is a way to equate that click value to MOA and that, but I'll get into that in another video. So I just want you to kind of understand. So like in the case of this, let's say I wanted to come in and I wanted to set up a new aiming point at 600 yards. It's as simple as hit on this circle with the plus, you know, short press to select that. Then, you know, I'm going to roll the encoder up and down to change the number values. Short presses will toggle me between the values. And then once I get it set the way I want it, I'm just going to long press to accept that and set that up as a new value. And so I'd come into this. This is essentially the windage elevation menu. I'm not going to go over how to do the zero here because I've got another video out that will explain that to you. But effectively, that's how you'd set it up. And then now you could go ahead and zero that 600 yard aiming point. When you get all done, you'll see where now, you know, there it's saying zero because I didn't change any values on it, but so it's the same as the primary because that's what it pulls forward. But you can see where it set that 600 yard aiming point. And so now that those are in there, if I come over here into the quick menu and I come in to my aiming point change, I have the ability to quickly and easily change between the aiming points, you know, which is going to adjust the reticle POI, and I'm able to shoot, you know, at any one of those yardages that I've zeroed. So that's kind of a quick explanation on what that's going to do for you. I don't want to get too in-depth here and get confusing. So let's get back into this. So now below the profiles, we have reticle type, and that's pretty self-explanatory. There's multiple reticles that you can select in here. Any of these reticles that have an FI designation are going to be expandable, or a first focal plane style expanding and contracting reticle that will expand and contract. As background magnification increases, they'll get bigger so that the stadia separations maintain constant throughout the power range, whereas the second focal plane reticles are going to be one size at all magnification levels. So, you know, if you were running a ballistic style reticle that is, you know, a second focal plane, you've got to be at the magnification setting for that reticle for the stadia separations to be right. If you go up or down power and deviate from that, then obviously the stadia isn't going to be right. But I personally, if I'm running ballistic calculation, I love the second focal plane reticles, because I'll just pick a second focal plane reticle that gives me a nice duplex, and then my SPOA mark moves up and down the line, and my reticle's nice, and you know, it's a nice usable reticle. It's not getting too small or too large, you know, it's just all one constant size, and my SPOA is moving to the exact impact point anyway. So on the ballistics, I like the second focal plane. If I'm running traditional and I just had one aiming point, then I might use an FI reticle. Truth is I really don't. I typically don't shoot on them standards much past about 250 or so yards, and so I'll just try to do a really good maximum point blank average that will work out for me. But with that said, you can see where you have a lot of reticle choices in there. If you come below that, essentially that's where you're going to see your reticle color choices. And, you know, I'll just kind of quickly roll through to give you an idea of what's available there. I have a tendency to like this black-green combination. I just find it user-friendly to my eye. And then we have the ability to control the reticle brightness here. We can turn that up or down utilizing this function right here. It's just a matter of short press that encoder button to open that feature and roll it up and down until you get to the desired level. So once you're at that desired level, then short press to accept that. If you don't short press to accept that, it's going to default you back to whatever you were on. So be aware of that, and that's going to hold true on all of these. So like if I come in here and I wanted to change my reticle color from black green to, let's say, white green, if I don't hit that button to accept it and it times out, it's going to switch me right back to black green. Whereas if I short press that, you can see where it's going to accept the change. So be aware that you have to do that short press to accept those. And again, like if I don't want to wait for this to time out and I want to get out quicker, I can hold down long press to back up one item. And then if I do it again, I'll back out of here quickly to the main screen. So long press to get back in there. Next we have the smoothing filter. You can see where I've got the smoothing filter turned on in this. I'm going to shut it off there. I really only had it on to show the icon. Previously I'd done the video showing the taskbar down there, and I just wanted to kind of show that. But I personally like to run the smoothing filter off. I think that I get a little bit sharper detail in the image with it off. Turning it on essentially adds a little bit of a blur effect to the image. And you say, well, why would you want to make the image slightly blurry? That doesn't make any sense. When you get a very highly rendered sharp detail in a video image, sometimes you can get a little edge artifacting, and it can be a little harsh, and it can create a little bit of eye fatigue. And so some people prefer to soften that a little bit, and essentially that's what that smoothing filter is going to do for you. Below that we have the color modes. So in color modes, that's essentially where you can change your color palettes or the gradient color blending. So you can see here we have white hot, black hot, red hot. So in a red hot mode, it's going to apply kind of a yellow red gradient overlay on the hottest objects. We have red monochrome, and then red monochrome and sepia in particular, those are pretty good low eye fatigue palettes. If you find yourself using your thermal and really having a lot of eye fatigue issues, in other words, if you find the screen to be too bright, which is something we're going to go over here in a minute, where there's a new display dimming function that I think will solve that for most people anyway. White hot and black hot give you the most vibrance because our eye can separate the black to gray color scale the best. In other words, we can see that the best. Reds we don't see quite as well, and because they're dimmer. So like if you go to red monochrome or sepia, where the gradient is going from like a bright red to black, and building the image in the shades in between those two colors, you won't get as much white light hitting your eye, and that will give you a lot lower eye fatigue in really dark ambient conditions. But then the downside to it is, I would argue all day long, unless you got really good visual acuity, an older guy like me is going to look at that and go, man, I can't see that image near as good in red monochrome or sepia, you know. And if you have faith in the device and the way the device works, and you just want to avoid the eye fatigue, you most certainly will be just about as effective as you would be. You just won't see things quite as sharply. But again, they've got a new display dimming function in here that I think really is the better alternative anyway. But back to those color palettes, you can see where there are other choices. The other choices mostly are going to be about you know, different scenario uses. Like in rainbow, you're going to get, or red hot, you know, you'll get a really good fast target acquisition, but you'll sacrifice some detail for those. So, you know, just be aware you have those palette choices. The next thing down here we have is user mode. I do like to run my user mode on, but that's going to be for more advanced users, in the sense that running the user mode on is going to effectively maintain or remember the contrast and brightness settings that you have under individual algorithms based, or the algorithm modes. So like your normal, high, and ultra modes. Running that user modes on is going to save your contrast and brightness settings associated with those individual modes. So if you don't run that, let's say for example that I'm in ultra mode and I switch from ultra to high, and I have user mode shut off. Well, if I went in and made an adjustment, let's say I've adjusted my brightness down to 0 and I've adjusted my contrast up to 6, and I'm not running user modes, and I switch out of ultra into high, when I go from ultra to high, it's going to give me the default factory settings of, let's say, 1010 on that high background, you know, in contrast and brightness. So the advantage to running user modes is, if I'm in a really dark setting and I want to have full manipulation over those, I can turn that on and I can have that. So that's what it does for you. But again, if you're newer to it, until you get comfortable with it, I would probably recommend you run that off, but later on you might find yourself wanting to run it on. The display settings are basically the auto display dimming feature. If you just turn that on, you'll see where that basically, it takes the whole display brightness down, and I mean, it takes it way down, and it can really be handy in very dark ambient conditions. So, you know what, previously, if you had brightness down to 0 and you made an adjustment again back to that 0 brightness, 6 contrast, you get the image, you know, it looks good, but you're as low as you can go on brightness, and it's still a little too bright for your eye and the conditions. If you turn this dimming on, essentially where you kind of left off at that 0 on brightness kind of becomes the new top of the scale, or at least middle of the scale. So it gives you a lot of adjustment. I would say at least an additional 50% adjustment downward. And I think that's an attribute you see in this newer device, because they've went to a better display. Another one of the big key attributes to the Pulsar, why the Pulsars are premium, is they use really premium displays in their units. You're just not going to find that in most of your other thermals. But long story short, we'll get back into the menu here. If you turn that on, you know, obviously it's going to give you that downward adjustment, and then you can also roll down here and adjust that dimming up or down on the icons a bit, and that will help a little bit with seeing that background image sometimes if that gets too low. But it's really just going to depend on the scenario that you're in as to whether you want that on or off. Obviously, I'm out here in the daylight, and so I'm going to want the thing turned off so that I'm getting, you know, maximal brightness out of my screen. But if it was very, very dark, a lot of times I do run that on. Next item that we're going to encounter is going to be the Bluetooth function. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, there's an on-off toggle up here at the top that allows you to turn it on and off. Short press to switch between that function. You know, rolling the toggle, or excuse me, rolling the encoder is what's going to get you onto the other menu items. So we have find accessory or device. That's if I want to hook up a remote. So for example, if I click on that, you know, it's going to start searching for the remote. And so in the case of this, I have one here. I just hit a button and you can see there where it says connection successful, and it was able to find that. You know, so now I could actually use this remote to manipulate my menu items by rolling this little encoder or that. This item down here is our Bluetooth pairing. Bluetooth pairing is for when you're hooking up to the StreamVision Ballistic app. So, you know, if you click on that Bluetooth pairing, it's going to be looking for the phone. You can see that now. So if you want to, you know, if you do that by accident, you want out of that again, long press will dump you right back out. So long press to get back out of that menu, and we're down here to the Wi-Fi settings. Wi-Fi settings is going to be pretty important on the new devices, because the new device after 3.3.100 firmware upgrade on the new Pro devices or LRF devices, you'll have to go in there to find your Wi-Fi password. Previously, all devices had a generic password 1 through 8 from the factory. Now, the devices, as a security update, all have a unique password to your individual device. So you're going to long press to get into the main menu, you know, roll to the Wi-Fi settings, short press to open that, and you can see your password visibly there in the screen. So in this menu as well, we have the on-off toggle. So if I hit that button there, you know, obviously it's going to turn the Wi-Fi activation on. You can see where down on the taskbar there is an indicator that pops up down there to let me know I've activated that. But below that, again, is the password. And then here we have an access level of owner or guest. If I set that in owner, I obviously have full manipulation over the device. If I set that to guest mode, it limits the access to the device when we're hooked up. There's another application where you can remotely use a StreamVision 2 to control the device, and it limits the controls that they'll have over the device if it's in guest mode. So, and then down here we've got where it says 5 gigahertz, I have the ability to switch it between a 2.4 or a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi antenna. That was another improvement when the Pro devices came out, as they went to a better Wi-Fi antenna inside of them. But I'm going to go ahead and shut this back off. And we'll get out of this menu and continue on. So you can see now where we're through everything in the first portion of the menu, and we're going to move on into the second portion.